Hi, good afternoon and welcome to all of you. And it's a delight to be meeting everyone. So I'm going to talk about getting published here, mainly in relation to journal articles. And I'm going to do this in the way this set of slides was originally put together by my wife, who's another professor, but not in law. She's a social scientist. And I'm using hers, though I've adapted it for us, because she, being an unbelievable workaholic, edits 3 journals. And so knows even more than I do, who only edit 1 journal. I do thank her for these. You'll see that there is an attention to social science issues here which are quite important. And I don't know whether all of you will be affected in the same way by the issues that are mentioned. But certainly people who write for the journal that I edit would also be affected by it, so I've left them. So these are going to be very straightforward and very obvious reasons why you might want to publish. And when it comes to the time that I talk through getting a job in academia, this actually features as David Sugarman's very first item. He says, get published, because otherwise the job is going to be much more difficult. All of these are fairly obvious, I would say. The ones which are not quite so immediately easy to understand is that sometimes with research which is funded, there are specifically named study deliverables. That's the 1, 2, 3, 4th item down. And one of those is publication or dissemination, so that that's a reason also to publish. That's what that means. And the others, I think, will be fairly obvious to you. We're not quite so involved, those of you who are PhD students here, in the university ratings exercise for these sorts of issues. But our rates of PhDs going through is taken account of. But certainly in the university ratings publications, as certainly until now at least, in everything. So these are the rather obvious reasons. Now, all of this is couched, first of all, from the point of view of an editor of a journal. And although you may feel you are completely on the other side to this, I think it's extremely helpful to see it from the editor's point of view. And if you can think of it in that way, it helps you to decide where you will publish, what you will write, how you will fashion whatever offering you're going to make to a journal. And she begins with what she calls footprint considerations. So, for example, my own journal is the International Journal of the Legal Profession. And in recently, about 3 years ago, one of my colleagues and friends, because we're not an enormous group of people interested in studying the profession, a friend from Germany wanted to write about the education of judges in relation to gender issues. So clearly that's a set of an article, or it was a special issue in fact, that might go in a number of different places. I mean, you might go in a journal which dealt with gender issues. You might go in a journal which dealt with judges only. You might go in a journal which dealt with fairness. All of those things were possible. I had to decide whether the footprint of the journal should actually be wider than it had been and should encompass things of this sort. Well, we've written about gender and the profession quite often. We've included material on that. And I said it was a colleague from Germany, and the civil lawyers did not consider that the judiciary were as different in the same way as we would here. And so it was more important for them, and I felt it was taking account of the civil approach, the civilian approach, as opposed to the common law approach. And so we made our footprint larger. But in general, you need, when you're looking at it from the other side, to think, well, what is the footprint of this particular journal, and is that the one I want to put my article in? There are, as you know, lots of journals, really for almost anything nowadays, and so making that decision is important. For editors, choosing the team that will support you is important, and so from your side, getting onto that team is extremely useful. If this is what you want to do, if you want to move into the academic world, and I can only say to you, for God's sake, don't. If you do, then actually being involved in the production of a journal in all sorts of ways is extremely helpful. And getting an idea from the editor's side is useful. So all of these things, selecting board members and the issues, the sorts of things you include. So we sometimes include book reviews and sometimes we don't. We find that quite difficult, and I'll come back to book reviews later. But that's obviously an easy area or easier area for you to get involved in and to volunteer to review books in your particular speciality. Will get your name inside the journal, so that's good. And there are issues which I'm not going to go into about rotating editorial boards. I'm dreadful at that. I just leave people on forever. But the people you use on your editorial boards are those generally you go out to for review. So those are important people, and they're the ones who can't easily turn you down for review, which is what happens quite frequently. And all of these others are really about footprint, choosing a focus, clarity of input, clarity of vision, setting boundaries, what to include and not to exclude, and then something which some journals are really good at, advice to authors, but some are dreadful. Mine is dreadful. Every time I look at it, I think it's dreadful. We've got to find another way of expressing this, but we don't. So be aware that it's not always as good as it might be, but you should read what it says. Quite often you can slip up because you haven't read the very simple advice to authors, such as we only accept things on this particular area, or we only accept things which are less than a certain number of pages, etc. And then, very important nowadays is whether things go through a system which is web-based, and all of these journals that I'm going to look at now are web-based, almost all are. If you've never submitted an article through a web-based system, it's an awful thing to do, but it's possible, and you get used to it, and you may get a little bit of help if you ask from the journal or the publishers itself. but it is different from just putting something in an envelope, because you have to fill in all the information in advance, and the result is that they have everything on you right from the beginning. Well, you might decide, and there are even some people in this room who've decided to set up an own journal, and putting things on the web nowadays, as you know, is not that difficult. So this institute has started 1 or 2 items and may do some more as time goes on. Be aware of these things that exist, and be aware that you might be right at the beginning, on the cusp of some new area that's just the one thing that hasn't got a journal ready for it. That's something for you to think about.
Can I make a small advertisement, Avrom?
Why not?
IALS have a student law journal, and Paolo is one of the editors of it, so if anyone's interested in submitting an article for that, I would strongly recommend you do that as well. That's the advertisement. One other thing, just we can't all stay for the full hour, so some people might believe it a bit early after.
Right, okay. Well, I better get on now. Here we go. When one starts something, and this isn't just clearly for people who want to start journals, you need to think about it as well. You have to work out really what the competition is, and that helps you to decide where you're going to put your article, but also in terms of editors, exactly what they're going to deal with. I quite like this one over here. My wife finds much, much better images than I do. We've met the enemy and it's us. I think that's brilliant. Here is the journal Boringly, which I publish, and here are the 3 which she edits. All of us are with the same publisher, who's Routledge, and these bloody publishing organisations eat up all the smaller publishers, and then they subject you to awful things. Okay, you need to be very aware of this. You probably are, but well, those of you sort of deep in the academic world will understand it. That most journals are peer-reviewed, so it's not up to the editor. The editor gets reviews and then makes a decision together with other members of the editorial board. All reviews are blind. You'll hear in a few minutes that they're not, but in general, all reviews are blind, and it is wrong to publish anything which hasn't had at least one blind review. That's the general position. When an article comes in, unless, for me, for example, the article is about the law of the company law in Argentina, and it's quite clearly not for my journal, I will just send that back. But if it's vaguely in the area, I will send it out to referees. It's an international journal, so we get stuff from all over the world, and I will nearly always try to find someone from the country that the article has come from, in order to check out that what they're talking about is actual and a fair analysis of it, because otherwise we wouldn't know necessarily. But otherwise, we would choose people who have written on the area or are likely to know about the area to be experts in the area. And in my world, that's actually a fairly small number of people. These are the things that are quite useful to know if you don't know. When the referee comments, they write both comments to the editor, which you as an author won't see, and comments to the author. Some people, it's rather a waste of time really, but some people send exactly the same to both. it's a bit silly because we see both anyway. Many people will say things like, well, I don't know about this one, it's up to you really, depends what the journal's looking for these days, something like that. Some people, very few, will say to the editor, this is absolute crap and you should not put it in. And then they'll say to the author, this is a very interesting and you think, I'm not sure I like this reviewer, I might not want to use them again. Interesting. It's not something that I would want to do personally, but some people clearly do. If you can, try to get involved in reviewing other people's work. I know it's a bit more difficult, but approach editors of journals, because we are always looking for reviewers. I mean, obviously we're looking for good reviewers, but we are looking for reviewers. And as I say, in almost all areas, there's not that many people who are able and available and want to do this. It's totally unpaid. It's often quite a bit of work. It's 2-3 hours work with a long article, and then if you're really going to start writing comments, and if you get, I don't know, half a dozen of those in a month, it's quite a lot. So if you can, engage in this process. And this is what I'm looking for as an editor. Clear critique. If you've got a conflict, I need to know. It should be a critique of the article and not the one that you wanted to write. And that quite often one sees. And it's very obvious when you see it. Somebody isn't as capable of critiquing someone else's work as they are saying what they think should have been done. That's different. And it's, in a way, it's a bit harder, but that's what we look for. And then this is what they advise: accepting it without revision, or revising it and resubmitting it, or it could be revised and accepted. Either in my journal we have sort of 3 or 4 sections at the end which we use, such as work in progress or legal education or the management of law firms or something like that, into which we put things which are not quite at the same level as a finished article. And of course it could be rejected. I have to say, in my area, it's rare that we reject articles just like that, because we're trying to encourage people to write. We would try to give people an opportunity to see what might actually work first.
Avrom, can I ask how much editorial input you have into the actual content of the article? Would you suggest the various changes that they would make, or would you just comment more generally on them?
Well, it wouldn't be me, it would really be what the referees say. And obviously sometimes I appoint myself as a referee if it's one of my areas or something like that, but I still then have to look at all the referees. I think then you're writing the article that you want to write. So actually, I mean, I think you can say this doesn't work, or that's not relevant, or you haven't developed this, things of that nature. But I don't think you have input in the sense of construction of what should be there. That's different.
Okay, so you wouldn't be so much suggesting things that they should include?
Well, I mean, if effectively they missed out an area of work and said that it doesn't exist, then that would be something which someone might mention, yes. That's a bit different, I think. Okay, this is really about the work that you need to do in order to get to the stage of having written a worthwhile article. So for you, I would say you need to think about how much you might need to change an element of your thesis or a chapter in order to fit in with this conception of what an article is. which is, of course, different, really, from a chapter in a thesis. Some of this is fairly, these steps are straightforward. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but look at the elements that you're thinking about for an article. That's rather different than a PhD, which, in a sense, is for everyone at all time. Here, you're selecting an audience, and well, these are the things you need to think about in relation to journals. There are these impact factors. Do you know what they are? If you don't, you can look it up, and each journal has an impact factor, which means basically how often it's quoted. And relevance to your area, things like, and people keep on asking me now, it's absolutely dreadful as editor, how long is it going to take for me to get this published? And it takes quite a long time. It's often up to a year with all the revisions that we wait to see. And I feel very bad when I tell people that, and I worry that they'll take it away. I don't think anyone has ever taken it away, but I then feel, God, I've got to try and keep to this now. And it's not up to me, it's up to mainly reviewers getting back in time. But all of these things are really important. If it's online submission, read instructions to authors, pay attention to all these things. Word limit is terribly important for editors. These dreadful people like Routledge and Taylor and Francis, who are the same as Routledge, and who publish all those journals, they demand that we keep each issue to a certain number of pages. Now, if you write in psychology, which is my wife's area, their articles are 3 or 4 pages long. But if you write in law, they can be between 18 to 35, 50 pages if you're American. I can't absolutely be sure of 123 pages exactly for each issue, but that's what I've got to come out with. So I've got to juggle with what goes in and also try to juggle with the contents to try and make something which looks interestingly readable. So word limit is terribly important. And look at previous published items. What do? We, as editors, look through all of these elements. Here is just one thing that I know Lorraine feels even more strongly than I do about, because with three journals, it's even worse. There is no recourse to appeal. Sorry, especially lawyers, to tell them that. There is no recourse to appeal. Someone has taught a large number of American academics that it's terribly important to appeal every single decision in relation to journals. So my poor lady is quite often gets this long monotribes from over the other side of the Atlantic. And it basically, there is no appeal. It's a system which works. Put your article somewhere else, or don't, but you can't appeal it. We don't have that possibility.
Could I just, sorry, I wanted to pause. I wanted to say something.
Sure.
Without the video.
Without the video.
I'll say
I can't help you there.
Okay.
Okay, maybe later. Here are some things that it's worth knowing about. Sometimes, either because it's been in a conference or because it's the 50th anniversary of something, or 10 years since somebody died, or whatever. These are special issues or supplements put out either as part of the normal issues for a journal or as additional items. Sometimes they are paid for. So a law faculty somewhere could pay for a special issue, which then gets distributed to all the those who subscribe to the journal and can extra copies can be made to send out to others. So it's worth looking out for these things if there's one in your area, or if you were involved in a conference where they talk about putting a special issue together, then this could be useful to you. And there is quite often then a guest editorial role, so the person who actually organised the conference might be the guest editor. And papers, well, it's not a shoe-in exactly, but it is easier to get in on a special issue. Other people will have heard the paper. They can be used as reviewers. There will always be, certainly for my journal, one blind reviewer, someone who doesn't know and has not heard it before. So I think that's quite important. But it is a bit easier to get in that way, so it's worth looking at for these. Do you know about open access and what that involves? So open access is the latest thing in publication, and it is that anyone can look at a particular article. You have to pay the publisher for this. If you are funded by, let's say, Wellcome or the ESRC or one of these, then they nowadays include funding for open access publication in general. Some universities will also fund it. It's a bit like those poets who write and pay to have their poems published. Such things exist, but not really. It has to be the same quality as other items which go into the journal. And open access is demanded in relation to some funded research, and so therefore it happens. So you could get an issue of a journal which has 4 or 5 items which are open access and 3 others which are not, something of that sort. But you need to be aware of that possibility. I'm now going to talk just a little bit about how you prepare data. This is as much about general methodology, but I think and I'll do it quite quickly, but if someone wants to hear more about it, you can stop me and ask questions. All of these journals, including mine, really deal with empirical data. And it may be that your own research is not empirical, but more library-based, and so this probably will not affect the work that you're doing. But a considerable worry is that people put any old research, that's rather unfair, but I think it's true to some extent, in as what they call qualitative data. They've had a talk with 3 or 4 people, they've come to some conclusions, and they put an essay together. They sometimes get undergraduate essays sent in as articles. It does happen, not that often, but it does. Qualitative data really does need proper methodology. If you're going to do anything of this sort, it needs to be good. There was a sort of war between the qualitatives and the quantitatives, and that's over. It's absolutely clear qualitative methodology is good, but it isn't these things. It's not just easy, inferior, or small sample size. It's highly analytical, standalone, very sophisticated, just like the research of a number of the people in this room, including some of my own PhDs. And here it talks about the different possibilities. So it could relate to quantitative elements, or it could be standalone. But it needs to be rigorous. That's really what this is saying. You can't just do 3 interviews and publish. It's got to be a real process. She does get such good pictures, doesn't she? I mean, look at that, that's amazing. Data coding, proper recording, clear aims and objectives, etc. And then higher order concepts, moving to a set of findings which are very clear. So here we go. This is a rather nasty, snooty academic look. Statements equals journalism. Concepts equals understanding. Explanations leads to theory. There we go. And it requires all of these things. Staying back on that. Artful conceptualizing and interpretation. Right. Quantitative work, I think people know more about this in general, although there's less of it which occurs in law. Needs some rigor, needs good data gathering, things like pre and post. Well, we've got one pre and post PhD going on at the moment here. It does happen. And then really good writing up. That's so terribly important, especially for a short article. Clear background, statement of aims, clear methodology, great results first, then emerging themes, and then interpretation. Okay, going back now to the write-up, whatever methodology you're using, title, abstract, introduction. I know you know these things, but you'll be amazed how often people sort of forget the structure that's expected. And it's fine to move away from that if it's clear why, but in general, keep to it because it's more likely to be acceptable. So, in relation to each of these, do find a clear, catchy title, something that's going to just grab the attention. The abstract is going to be the public face. Make sure absolutely that you've got ethical approval. It will be demanded by any journal editor if you've done any empirical work. And then your results and discussion. So, what happens? Here's the submission. It's appropriate to send out for review. Goes to at least 2. I sometimes send it to 4, maybe get 2 back. And then editor and author comments go back to the, editor comments go back to the author resubmits, the author sends comments, etc. And it comes back. It might come in as a short report, might come in as an article, and it might be published all in that line. It will be rejected. So these are the things, again, you've got to do in order to pass the mark. Clear study, novel if possible, good presentation, word limit, and ethics. Rejection is usually for these reasons. And it happens. People ignore instructions. Revisions. Okay. It's unlikely, if you've not written before, that you will get an article through on the first occasion. And the reviewers will suggest revisions. Here, I think, are really good ideas for how to set that out. Set out a table of reviewer comments, and then put your answers against each point. And preferably, don't say, reviewer comment A, fuck off, I can't stand you. Say, reviewer comment A, this is really interesting. I've done quite a bit of research in this area. I don't think it's relevant to what I'm writing about. That's all right. But don't be rude and don't be silly. You'd be amazed at what people will write. Answer each one point by point, give detail. Here, don't appeal to the editor. This is good. This happens all the time. Don't disagree and not explain. Don't use this as an argument to lengthen the manuscript. That happens all the time. Don't give the editor choices. Don't say to the editor, if you want me to do this, I'll do this. Or if you want me to do... Editors will not tell you what to do. That's an absolute. And this is very difficult, but it is an important part, I would have to say, of life. Don't be unwilling to take criticism. All of us can do with criticism at some time or another. So that sort of repeats it. Importance of the title, capture the essence, grab your audience. Here are some titles. This is a mix, mainly of my area, but there's also some from, which are a bit more interesting, from Lorraine's journals. Work commitments in the legal profession, a study of baby boomers and Generation Xers. I think you can work out which journal that is. The myth of feminization, women and cultural change in the legal profession. The demise of diversity in legal education. And then this clinic is number one, a qualitative study of factors that contribute towards successful care of the South African pediatric. I mean, it grabs your attention. It's hard to know what is a risky or not a risky decision. Gay men's beliefs about risk during sex. Here's some emerging issues. Web-based articles. My journal and the other three, they will publish on the web each article as it comes through without waiting for an issue to be allocated. And that can be good for you. Sometimes if you've actually said you're going to give this item at a conference and it gets published earlier than the conference, that can be very bad for you. And sometimes as editor, you tell them not to publish it and they still do. So that can be quite awkward. So one needs to be aware of these things, but in general, it's not a problem. And it means that you get out much earlier. And people look for your stuff, people look for your stuff on the web, and it is something of a balance. Here's another set of emerging issues. This is the aggressive appeals issue, mainly from across the pond, saying that the people who reviewed my article clearly are not the right people. There's quite a bit of that. They don't understand what I was trying to say, or they don't want to, and the advice that you give to them is not relevant, or they offer the editor something else.
I think on that, we once had someone who rejected the article and they said that we were in league with the devil.
Ah, well, in that case, of course, they were entirely correct. Knowing Ronan completely, I mean, it's clear that yes, I would have just said, well, yes. In league with the devil, yes. They meant that the devil was in the beast. Well, this is all I'm going to say about publication, and I'm sorry, it is after lunch, and I know that at least 3/4 of you are ready to sleep. I'll try and get a bit more interesting for David Sugarman's piece.